I recently did a closet clean out, and that was the first step of many steps in an upcoming move that I have. Every move that I've made, which there have been many, I have gone through my books to weed some out that I did not want to move. And I can remember the first time I moved and I was doing this, I was selling books and donating others. And my grandma was like so devastated because she's like, Katie, I always pictured you someday with, a library filled with books. And I was like, yeah, kind of me too. But, I only want to move things that I really care to move. So tonight I went to do a look through of my books, which there are not many. For years, I haven't read like I used to. And between that and Kindle books and libraries, I just haven't collected books like I did when I was younger. I was surprised to look through my books tonight and see that there aren't any that I'm going to get rid of this move. I'm going to move all of them. And so I thought I'd kind of put together a favorites chat, my favorite books. How many people can say their favorite book is one that they've never read? Me. And I'll tell you why in just a bit. First, I wanted to start with Tuesdays with Maury. I read this book 20 or 25 years ago, and it is making the favorite list just because of the impact that this had on me when I read it. Honestly, I looked at this time around and I was like, maybe I'm ready to part with this book. And I flipped through these pieces of the book that I have marked just to post-it notes, because that's how we did it when we were young. We didn't readily have page flags available to me. But anywho, I flipped through it and was thinking, is now the right time to part with this book? And it's funny because I put one post-it here when I read this back in the day, and it says, "People are only mean when they're threatened, Maury." And it was on page 154. That quote spoke to me right now because it's something that I fear doing YouTube are mean comments, things that are going to cut me and hurt. And so seeing that just was like, oh, okay, maybe I should keep hanging on to this book. And again, looking through the pieces of the book that I flagged, there's one piece where Maury talks about building kind of your own subculture. And I'll read just a piece of it. I won't start at the beginning because I think then it will be too long. But he says, the small things I can obey, meaning in society, right? But the big things, how we think, what we value, those you must choose for yourself. You can't let anyone or any society determine those for you. I could read more of this, but I think that's the most profound piece of this. And I truly live my life by that. I'm older. I am unmarried. I live alone. I've chosen not to have children. I think this book likely had an incredibly profound impact on my life and how I'm living my life today as an adult. So not only am I classifying this as a favorite for that reason, I also intend to reread this book this year. I can't help but look at the pieces that I've flagged and say, wow, when I, was a teenager and read this book, it clearly had a large impact on me. And I love it for that. The next book that I want to claim as a favorite, this is The Little Book of Huga. So this book, I would say, falls into a favorite category, and I'm just not sure exactly what that category is. And that's because of the two things that I really took away from this book. One, how unhealthy burning candles is for us. I did not realize that. So it was very interesting to learn that in this book that was incredibly unexpected. I actually, when I do burn candles and if I turn on my air purifier, which senses the air, my air purifier kicks into overdrive. So that's wild. Generally, I stick with beeswax candles with like natural wicks and stuff to try to minimize the damage. But anywho, the other takeaway from this book was how people get together with their friends. And one thing I really took away was kind of in the area of having your friends over. I used to think about like, oh, having dinner parties, how fun, how glamorous. And there's a time in my life when I would have friends over for dinner. I felt very stressed to try to put on a dinner for people. And it wasn't even anything fancy. But this book taught me that there's a way to have people over where everyone brings an ingredient or, part of the recipe. And you don't just feed everyone, but you come together and you cook together and then you eat together. And I just thought that was so powerful. One, because I know a lot of people will talk about the cost of hosting people. So this is a great way to share in the cost, but also it gives you more time to be with one another. And isn't that, after all, really what it's about? So I really love that. And that actually, like that little tidbit, really influenced my choosing of the floor plan of where I'm moving next. The construction manager was like, isn't this a strange layout with where your kitchen is? And I was like, I really love it. And maybe it is strange to many people. I actually think it is probably going to hit the strange bucket for many people. But with thinking on how I would love to have friends over, hang out and cook together, and then share the meal, it makes that floor plan perfect. And I would not have that idea. I would not have that dream if it weren't for this book. So, a favorite for sure. The rest of the books definitely fall into favorite categories that I know how to categorize. The next book that is of my favorites it's my favorite book cover. So it's this one, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Now, if you're from UK or any of the places that this book was the standard cover, that might seem funny to you that this is a favorite. But in the United States, our book covers were very childish. So receiving this book as a gift from my sister that she picked up at a time that she was studying in London, getting this book as a gift from her, and with how drastically different the cover is, just makes it so special, especially that she picked this book up for me when this book was new. So it's a first print as well. So I love this, and I definitely treasure it for sure. My next favorite book, I put into the category and have for years, it's my favorite translation. It's actually the first book that I'm at least aware was translated from another language that I really enjoyed. Now, I question whether I'm always aware that the books that I'm reading are translation, but my favorite book, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. This book was a favorite for many reasons. One, it's a little bit darker than my happy comedy type fictions that I typically read back then and now. At the time, I just thought like, wow, I finally found a translated book that I enjoy reading. Now, again, I'm not sure that that was a fair call, but it is one that I made. So I loved also just the twists of this book. I mean, there's a reason why it became so popular. So my next book to share is my favorite book kind of like my favorite series that I've ever read. And that's Confessions of a Shopaholic. I don't know if Sophie Kinsella is still writing this character. I will say, after there were two books, I think the last book came out 7 or 8 years ago, the one that I'm aware of anyway. And I had read the one prior to that, and I was like, ooh, I'm really thinking that this character isn't for me anymore. And then when I read the next one, I was like, wow, there's nothing redeemable about this character. And it kind of fell out of favor. But that does not change the fact that in the early books of this series, many of these books really spoke to me. When I was younger, I was in a similar situation as many, graduating from college and not having a job that really allowed me to kind of live the life that I wanted to live and pay for my student loans. And reading this book, this series really kind of lightened my heart during that time. I love the letters from the bank in here, the wild stories of it, the twists and the turns that she puts in there. I really enjoy it. Also the fact how it like shares her line of thinking of, like, oh, I haven't read this book in years and I can still remember she's like, oh, I'm going to make a curry, instead of getting take home, I'm going to make curry at home. And then she buys all of the stuff and it's, hundreds of dollars, and she's like, well, that's okay though because it's an investment. So it just cracks me up. And it really the series really came into my life at the right time, at a time that made it really what it is to me. And these are fun reads, but I will say it's hard sometimes to find anything redeemable about the character Bex, especially in the later books. So I don't even have those last two books of the series in my moves. Those are books that I've parted with. However, I do have the early series books. And they're probably one of my most reread. I haven't reread these in forever. And maybe this one in particular is one that I should reread this year, just like Tuesdays with Maury. So next, I have what I'm classifying as my favorite book. My favorite read is actually more accurate. And that's And the Band Played On. So this book took me a very long time to read because I was reading it while recovering from 9 months of eye issues. Eye trouble that left me blind in my left eye. But this book is perfect to read slowly because of the way that it's written. This is a investigative journalism piece on the AIDS epidemic. And so it has all the different perspectives of patients, doctors, researchers, politicians, business owners. It has all of these kind of perspectives. And I found things worthy of flagging with the modern day page flag. And I flagged it for various reasons. Some, it just spoke to me for political type reasons, nothing to do with AIDS epidemic, but just, for example, this quote that says, "The problem lies in the desire to protect the little that we have gotten by not risking a fight for what we deserve. The problem lies in believing that what we have gotten is somehow a favor given by politicians, rather than the politicians' recognition of what we have, the political power to demand and to get." This part also speaks to me, the concern that we're still unable to build the kind of power that was not dependent on the regress of the elite. So not only was I reading this when I was recovering from some eye trouble, but also because this took me so long to read, it overlapped with the COVID pandemic. And I finished this early on in the pandemic. And so I was able, people were frustrated with like, oh, we're getting this type of information, not this type of information, or, they've changed their minds on things. And I had some interesting insights from reading this, such as the struggle that public health administrators had in what to convey to the public due to not wanting to cause like mass panic. So that was really interesting insight to have. So again, as far as I'm looking through my books, this I would say is my favorite read, and I would recommend everyone read it. I didn't know that the blood industry was a blood industry. I thought when I don't go donate my blood because I have a thing with IVs or needles in my vein. So I don't do that, but I think a lot of people think they're donating blood and it's going to stay in their community. But this book told me, no, a lot of blood gets shipped to other countries. So even that and learning that piece of the history is still just kind of mind-blowing. It's probably something that I've read more recently, and anything that I can remember where it just really made me go, oh, I had no idea about that. So highly recommend this book. I classify this as my favorite read, and that's because early on I said that my favorite book is one that I've never read. And that book is this. So this is a copy of Pilgrim's Progress. And funnily enough, this book is actually referenced in like the first page of Little Women. This book belonged to my grandma. She gifted this to me because it was a cherished book of hers. And she knows how much I love books. And so it was so thoughtful of her to give the book to me. Her most cherished book has become my most cherished book. And it's one that I've never read. And honestly, I should look into what this book is about, because I'd kind of guess that I don't prefer what's written in it, but I'll never know. Either way, it's my most cherished book. It's my favorite book, and it's a book that I've never read. Well, everyone, I really hope you enjoyed looking at my favorite books. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite book is, or give me a list of your favorite books. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Give this video a like and subscribe. I would love to have you as part of my community.